The walking bass line, the unsung hero of the jazz ensemble, the offensive guard of the football team, the right wing player guy of soccer, football. If anyone outside of the United States can explain to me something about soccer, I would be so appreciative. What I'm trying to figure out is, what is the kind of player who has to play all the time and do the hard work and doesn't get the glory, doesn't get the spotlight? That's our role as bass players. We don't get the spotlight, we're just back there shoveling coal, making the train go. So it might not seem very fun to play walking bass, but the more you study it, the more you'll find nuance and beauty in the melodies that are created in these parameters that are set up for us. Welcome to Learn Jazz Bass with Matt Rybicki. If you're interested in getting more videos about how to play jazz bass, be sure to subscribe. Please like this video and check the link below for a free PDF that has to do with today's discussion. Now, as in some other videos, I'm going to be doing a little bit of talking before we get to the playing. If you want to jump right to the playing, please go ahead. I won't be offended. I've made chapters below so you can pick and choose where you'd like to start or end or what parts you'd like to skip. So let's get to it. Today we're talking about how to play a walking bass line. And of the many things that make up a great bass line, one thing I wanted to point out at the very first is the most important thing about playing that line, and that is that it feels good. And that can mean a whole lot of things. Generally, when we say it feels good, we're talking about sort of the rhythmic approach or the rhythmic attitude. Is it very swinging? Is it very confident? But also we're talking about, does it feel good for the listener? Does it feel good, especially for your fellow bandmates? You want to give a good feeling to your bandmates and to the listeners. Make them snap their fingers, tap their toes. You know, the great Pops Foster, who was a bass player in early New Orleans, was playing a traditional kind of music that eventually became what we call jazz. Pops Foster said, "You know, I just play any old go-to-hell note." Now, we don't want to completely ignore the notes that we're playing, but the spirit of what Pops is talking about, I think, applies here. And that again is that the feeling is more important than the accuracy of the pitches that you're choosing. So as we go into talk about specific pitches, don't forget that this is the more important thing as we go ahead and talk about some specifics that have to do with creating a walking bass line. What is a walking bass line? How do we play it? Well, first let's talk just a brief overview. Traditionally, when jazz music was created, ensembles had a tuba player, not a double bass player. As time went on, musicians found that the double bass had a more pleasant mix with the other instruments. And importantly, because bass players don't rely on creating their notes with their breath, you can play an unbroken string of notes. The tuba player, of course, has to take a breath. That kind of caused a little bit of a sense of potholes in the road. But a bass player can play an unbroken string of quarter notes as long as they're breathing. And so this provides a much more smooth surface, a paved road, if you will, for improvisation to occur. Walking bass lines are functional and they are part of collective improvisation. Simply put, they are improvised melodies with harmonic and rhythmic guardrails. Generally, we're sticking to the sound of the chords, respecting the melody, and playing mostly quarter notes. That said, like I alluded to earlier, there's a lot to be done within those parameters. Walking bass lines help to define the harmony of the song. They act as a keystone that other musicians can sort of rest their ears on so they know where they are. We have a lot of responsibility as bass players to make sure that we know the song and that we're able to communicate that with our fellow band members. So come with me to play some walking bass and let your fingers do the walking. The first thing I want to emphasize today is to approach a blues in the key of G, like the Ray Brown sample, but thinking about it from just using triads. A triad is a basic chord. It's made up of 3 separate notes. There are 4 kinds of triads: the major triad, the minor triad, the diminished triad, and the augmented triad. Each of these have a particular sound and are constructed in different ways. Now, I want to make it known that when I am speaking about what goes into making a chord, be it a triad or a more sophisticated chord, we are speaking of numbers in relation to the root of the chord, and that root, like G7, G, that root, we are basing the number analysis off of what a major scale from that root would be. Let me repeat that one more time. So if you have a G7, we're going to talk about the numbers and the construction of that scale based off of a G major scale, and we're going to make changes based on the quality of that chord. If it's a C minor 7 chord, we're going to use C major as the reference point, and we're going to talk about the notes that make this minor chord in relation to those major scale notes. Hopefully this will make some more sense as we talk a little bit more about triads right now. The first one I mentioned is a major triad, and this is created by taking the first, third, and fifth notes of a major scale. You can also say root, third, fifth, or sometimes you would say 1, 3, 5, or root 3, 5. You'll see on the PDFs attached to today's lesson, sometimes I use R underneath the analysis, and sometimes I use 1. Either is fine. If we're talking about a G major triad, we're in the key of G as in this example, we are thinking again of G major. The notes of the G major scale are G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So if we play the first note, the third note, and the fifth note, we have 1, G, the root, then we skip the A and play B, the third. That's the third note of the scale. We go 4, 5. The D natural is the fifth of the scale. So we have 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, G, B, D. And you can put in the higher octave of any of those notes actually, but to sort of complete the 4-note sort of cycle, we'll put the octave of the root. So G, B, D, G, right? Now it doesn't matter what octaves you play these elements of the chord in. It doesn't matter what octaves you use. However, it does matter where you start. In other words, if you don't start with the root, but it is still a major triad, that's called an inversion. And we will deal with that in another video. But for now, we're going to do root position triads. So a G major triad again, G, B, D, G again. A C major triad, C, E, G, C. Again, we are basing the construction of this triad off of the root. To move on to the second kind, we have minor. So if we have a G minor triad, the ingredients would be root and a flat third and the fifth. When I say flat third, I am saying I'm taking the naturally occurring third of a G major scale, which would be B natural, and I am flatting it. I am taking it down a half step to B flat. So that would be G, B flat, D. So 1, flat 3, and then we have the same 5 as before, D natural. If we're going to do an F minor triad, F is the root, A flat is the minor third, C is the fifth. For a diminished triad, we're going to flat the third and the fifth. So it's root, flat third, and flat five. A G diminished triad would be the root, which is G, the flat third, B flat, because B natural is in the G major scale, and D flat, because it is a flat five. The five would be the natural D, D natural. We're going to lower that by a half step to D flat. G, B flat, D flat, G, D flat, B flat, G. A C diminished triad. C, E flat, which is the flat third, G flat, the flat five. Flat third, one. F diminished, F, A flat, and C flat, which is the N harmonic note to B natural. That was a fully diminished chord there. We'll get to that another time. For augmented chords, we have the natural root, the natural third, and then the fifth is raised, augmented, added. It's up, a sharp five. So we go up a half step. For a G augmented triad, we have G, one, or root, the third, B natural, and now we're going to take the fifth and raise it a half step. So the fifth naturally is D, we're going to go to D sharp, which is also E flat. So G, B, D sharp, G, B, D sharp. For F, that would be F, the root, A natural, the third, and C sharp, the fifth, up a half step, C sharp. F, F, A, C sharp, F, C sharp, A, F. 1, 3, sharp 5, 1, sharp 5, 3, 1. So, to apply this to walking bass lines, let's go to the G blues again, and I'm going to ask you to play along with me. I'm going to put this up on the screen here next to me. So let's try it together. What we're going to do is play a couple choruses of a blues form. That means we're going to repeat the form of the blues 2 times in total. And we're going to use our knowledge of major triads to make a basically functional walking bass line that helps to reinforce the sound of the chords that we're hearing. See if you can notice right away what notes are which in relation to the chord itself. What is the root? What is the third? What is the fifth? This is 99% major triads here in this bass line. Play along with me. We're going to have a count off. I'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll go. 1, 2, 3, 4. So, were you able to determine which of the bass notes represented which part of the chord as we played? What did you think? Did it sound okay? I think it was pretty good. There's a lot more we can do, of course, but it's a decent start with just one sort of basic little bit of information. So now, let's take the same idea and apply it for minor triads. Remember, the construction of a minor triad is the root, the flat third, and the fifth. Here we're going to play a minor blues form. That's where primarily the chords are minor. And we're going to take, again, 2 choruses, 2 rotations through the form. And again, notice if you can where these notes are in relation to the chord itself, where the bass notes are. We're drilling this so that we can really get the sound of the triads and the feeling of the triads in our ear and body. Here we go. I'll give you another count off. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we're going to go on to the next kind of triad, which, if you remember, is the diminished triad. These are constructed with the root, the flat third, and the flat fifth. Here we've gone back to what might be called a regular or a major blues, but we've added some diminished triads in the chords. See if you can find them, and let's play along together, right? You and me? Let's do it. Let's do it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Comes. Here it is. Again. There was another one there. And so now finally, we're talking about that 4th kind of triad, and that is an augmented triad, which again is the root, the natural third, and a sharp 5. The 5th is raised a half step. We're back here to a normal or a regular blues, but we've changed the quality of some of these triads to be augmented. See if you can find them. I'm gonna count you off. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so you've got the basic idea of some ways that we can help to accurately reflect the color of the chords that are being played. These are pretty basic chords for all intents and purposes. That's okay. I'm not saying they're not good nor sophisticated in their own way. There's a lot to be done with a very small bit of information. Amazing music has been made from just these sort of basic ingredients of these triads. So, getting to my point here, we listened to that Ray Brown, and hopefully you played that Ray Brown bass line from a G blues from earlier. Let's take a look at it again, but now through the lens of these triads that we've looked at. What I've done in the PDF that you can get for free in the link below is to analyze this bass line and write in where we have basic ingredients of basic triads. So if you look at it with me, you'll see that in the very first bar, bar 1, we've got nothing but root 5, 3, 5, root 5, right? Right to root. If you go on, you can see that in measure 4, for example, we've got root 5, root 5 again. And as you go on and on in studying this bass line, you'll see that there is what percentage-wise, what is it, 70, 80% of this is already just basic triads that we've already talked about. And this is Ray Brown, right? A true master of the music, one of the pantheon of great bass players in the history of the music, playing on a seminal album, Night Train, from the Oscar Peterson Trio. And it sounds fantastic. And there is nothing that you can't understand in what's here. You know, complicated things are generally made up of a lot of smaller, simple things that are built on top of each other. So let's start with those simple things and get your mind around the triads as we work to make our walking bass lines. In part 2, we'll continue to look at Ray Brown's bass line and see these other devices that he's using in the line that are outside of the triads we've been discussing here in part 1. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you've got something out of our discussion today. Remember to subscribe and like this video. Check out that link below for the free PDF. And always remember, straight ahead and strive for tone.